The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. I was going to start off today telling you about some journalists that are being charged with felonies after being arrested while covering the unrest around Donald Trump's inauguration, when this morning I heard from a longtime viewer and member, Shane, who told me that he was one of the people arrested and charged with felony rioting in Washington, D.C. He actually needs legal help. So I'm going to tell you Shane's story. If you're an attorney who would be willing to help Shane, ideally pro bono here, get in touch and I will put you in touch with Shane. So Shane wrote to me and said, thought I'd let you know I was one of the 217 people arrested and charged with felony rioting in D.C., lumped in with anarchists and journalists. It seems like the evidence is weak or non-existent. If you happen to know any criminal defense attorneys in D.C., I'm taking recommendations. Perhaps you could ask the audience in the bonus show. Clearly, it has not been a great week. After everything is resolved, I'd be willing to share more information about my experience. It seems like they are making an example out of us. I also have 9 co-defendants whom I had never met until we were kettled together for 8 hours by police on January 20th. They moved us out in batches of 10 or so at random. The kettling occurred at L and 12 streets. Basically, anyone in that block that was standing around was pinched into this large group. It sounds, Pat, like police just saying, let's arrest the entire group. We don't care who's doing what. If you're here, you're getting arrested.
Yeah, and we have to take care of our own. So I guess if there is anyone who is qualified to help this guy out, we should do it.
By all means, feel free to get in touch. And this relates to the other story I was going to tell you, which is that indeed 4 more journalists have been charged with felonies after being arrested while covering what was going on outside of Donald Trump's inauguration. This means that there are now a total of 6 media workers facing up to 10 years in prison and a $25,000 fine if convicted. We're working on a piece, Pat, about all of the ways in which the Trump administration directly and indirectly is stifling speech, censoring media, and limiting diversity of thought. We saw Kellyanne Conway show up and tell Chuck Todd on NBC that, hey, if he keeps up these questions she doesn't like, NBC might lose access to the president and to the president's staff, a total direct threat to media. We've talked about the disappearance of the comment line at the White House, which now tells you instead of calling to leave a comment, you've got to send some Facebook Messenger message or something like that. We know about Ajit Pai, who has been selected by Donald Trump to be the chairman of the FCC, a total anti-net neutrality right-wing Republican. And it goes on and on and on. And lumping in journalists covering an event with those who are protesting and may or may not have committed a crime, right? I'm not saying that no crimes were committed, but if you're a journalist covering a protest, to start charging those journalists with felonies, that is very dangerous.
Yeah, and also a bad reflection of your police department. I mean, most of the police departments in D.C. are quite cognizant of free speech, too. I mean, they're some of the best in the whole country about it because of just the location where it is. I mean, the D.C. police in particular, the Capitol Police. So it's surprising that these arrests would come from them in particular.
Yeah. When you were in D.C., did you have any direct observations of actions or non-actions by D.C. police?
Luckily, I had no altercations with police. But I mean, if you just look at the map of who has what jurisdiction in that town, it's really interesting because you'll go one block and you'll be in the Secret Service's jurisdiction. You go to the next block, you're in D.C. Metro, the transit police, whatever they call it there. Capitol Police. There's a whole bunch of different departments there.
That's interesting. I've never seen that map. I should take a look at that. And I assume around the Capitol would be an area where it's not just regular D.C. police.
Capitol Police.
Capitol Police, yeah. Okay, so we're going to continue following it. We'll follow Shane's story. We will also follow what's happening to the journalists. Again, any criminal defense attorneys out there who want to help Shane out, by all means, get in touch. We talked on the regular show today about Donald Trump signing these executive orders to try to move forward with 2 pipelines, Keystone XL and Dakota Access Pipeline. I already talked about the sort of environmental impact, how we were being left behind by countries like China and India. I don't want to rehash that, but I want to just delve into one other aspect of why these pipelines don't really make any sense. So this is a purely economic analysis. It doesn't take into consideration disruption of native lands. It doesn't consider effect on the environment. It's just an economic analysis. back when oil was around, I want to say $70 or $80 per barrel, an economic analysis was done of Keystone XL, and it was determined that at those oil prices, it doesn't make economic sense to do Keystone XL. In other words, oil is too cheap to justify what you would make from it, given the costs of creating the pipeline. I think we can all imagine that. If it costs you more to set up the pipeline, and if the price of oil is so low that it'll take you who knows how many years to recoup the costs, it's not really good business. That was when oil was between $70 and $80 a barrel. It's drastically lower now. So we're reviving something. Donald Trump is reviving something, Pat, which at old prices didn't even make sense. Oil has gotten even cheaper. This doesn't even make financial sense. This is completely optics and the idea that Trump is going to be the drill baby drill or whatever dude. But this isn't even a moneymaker.
And according to one economist, the price of oil per barrel would have to be something like $85 to $90, which, you know, I think you would have to go back to like 2007, 2008 to go back to those numbers.
Yeah.
Clearly not the trade-off you want to have. The price that oil would have to be for these pipelines to be economically feasible, you just don't want oil to be that high to begin with.
No, you don't. And if oil is that expensive, then at least partially to blame would be OPEC and some of our not so morally upstanding allies in the Middle East, including Saudi
Arabia.
Yes,
wow.
yeah. So listen, I mean, I think I don't have to convince most people in our audience that we shouldn't be doing these pipelines, but I just am trying to stress to you how it doesn't even make economic sense. We hear from the right that if it keeps making economic sense to do these pipelines, then we should do it. Well, look at the price of oil. It just doesn't make any sense. And I want to go one step further with that, which is if oil weren't subsidized, we have so many subsidies for the oil industry, even some of what is still making money would also no longer make any economic sense. We just so heavily subsidize with taxpayer money, fossil fuel, exploration, drilling, production, et cetera. We would move so quickly away from fossil fuels if the government stopped encouraging it through subsidies.
And you made this point yesterday, so I don't want to rehash it too much, but the whole point of pipelines is to get people who transport the oil, like truckers, off of the road, and that would cause tens, maybe thousands of people their jobs too.
Yeah, I would say more than thousands. I would say, I mean, we're being conservative, so we'll say certainly at minimum thousands, but it might even be more than that. This just makes no sense. The world is. It's funny. We were the laughingstock of the world under George W. Bush. That was something we were aware of. That was nothing compared to what's going on under Donald Trump. I mean, it's just laughable lunacy.
Yeah, I mean, with Donald Trump, you take the intellectual curiosity of George W. Bush, and then you add all this narcissism on top of it. I think that's what you get with him.
Bush comparatively seemed humble relative to Trump.
Oh, yeah.
Don't you think?
Definitely. Yeah, he was definitely humble. I don't think that was. His ego was one of the criticisms you can't really make about him.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Basic income. Okay, basic income is something we've talked about a lot increasingly as we think about moving towards a post-scarcity society, at least conceptually, even though depending on allocation of resources, that may not actually happen ever or certainly soon. I've been talking about the logic of basic income, and I've told you about a few basic income experiments that are being done. There are actually 8 basic income experiments that we can pay attention to during 2017. One of them is in, what country is this one? Kenya. In Kenya, there are going to be 40 villages that will start receiving $22.50 per month for 12 years. And 80 villages are going to get the same amount of money for just 2 years. And then 80 villages will get a lump sum equal to the 2-year amount. And then 100 villages are going to get no money. And we're actually going to get some really good impact data on how these different basic income programs can affect what are very, very poor villages in Kenya. Finland, I've already told you about. There was a 2-year experiment. It launched on New Year's Day. There are going to be 2,000 unemployed citizens who will get $600 a month in Finland. And we will see what impact that has. That one I've already told you about. In Oakland, California, Silicon Valley's largest startup accelerator, which is called Y Combinator, they are going to start paying monthly salaries between $1,000 and $2,000 a month to 100 families in Oakland, and we will see what happens there. And in the true sort of spirit of basic income, the families will be from diverse economic situations, because the idea here is that this would not be a means-tested basic income. Really, it would just be Everybody gets it. We replace all social welfare programs with it, and we see what the impact is. Utrecht in the Netherlands is going to be, this is tentatively set up for early this year. They're going to do a 2-year basic income experiment with 250 Dutch citizens receiving $1,100 per month. And there's a number of others. There's one in Ontario, Canada. There's one in India that's being done, one in Italy, one in Uganda, etc. This is really good. We are going to be doing these tests, number one, in countries of significantly different economic circumstances. And in many of the countries, it will be done with individuals across a pretty broad range of economic circumstances. So I don't know what the results will be, but that's why we're doing it. We're going to figure it out.
And it seems like just about all of these scenarios have private companies giving these universal basic incomes out to people.
Yeah.
So I guess if the results were positive, they would then take that information and present it to these governments and offer maybe a solution to some of the economic disparity we have in these countries?
That's what I think. Yeah. I mean, no matter where the money is coming from, you can measure the impact. And then you could actually make a case. Let's say this goes really well, right? Let's say the results are positive. Then you can go and say, okay, listen, we've got food stamp program with its own bureaucracy and administration. And then we have just all the different programs that exist, right? You just say each
social
one of these,
nets.
all the social safety nets, all of these have their own administrations. They are means tested. There's bureaucracy. You have to see whether someone qualifies and then kick them off. All of that is money and apparatus. It's government apparatus. You can get rid of everything, including, remember, Trump wants to reduce federal employment. What better way than actually getting something in place that makes all of these federal programs unnecessary? You give everybody some money. You get rid of all those programs. Your administrative costs go down drastically. And we measure the economic impact. I think that's the case that there is to be made.
I think that makes plenty of sense because, I mean, you think about the administrative costs of giving money equally out to everyone, and it's not means tested. I think there would be much reason for the bureaucracy levels to go down in that case.
It's actually the same sort of analysis that's often done with single-payer healthcare, national healthcare, which is if we just say, okay, it's paid for through taxes, maybe taxes go up a little bit, you eliminate all of the medical billing infrastructure that exists, not all, but almost all of the medical billing infrastructure that exists in the medical world. So if this is done honestly, all of those savings, the fact that medical billing is no longer something that's necessary, the fact that there are no more uninsured people that have to be accounted for in the risk pool and priced into premiums, you get rid of all of that. You add a little bit to people's taxes. Think about how much more efficient such a system would be.
It certainly would be. I mean, there's plenty of people who would have to be convinced on the idea of a universal basic income.
Yeah.
But one of the arguments you could make is that it would be cutting out all of these bureaucracies.
Of course.
People want, it seems, less government in some of these areas, and that's the case you could make.
It's so funny how the right claims to want less government, and you come up with 5 or 6 different ideas for reducing government, but those aren't the right ones. They actually want more government when it comes to that. Okay, that's it for the bonus show. Thanks to everybody who has signed up in the last few days. The influx of members continues in the Trump era, and I'm glad people are really understanding and identifying with the importance of supporting programs like ours.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.